Hey all, it's Dr. Ruth Dotton here. I'm a board-certified adult psychiatrist who uses metabolic and lifestyle interventions to get at the root causes of mental illness. So we've talked about how to tell if you have insulin resistance. Today we're going to start talking about what you can do about it if you learn that you have it. And we're going to start with dietary interventions. We're going to cover 3 different strategies, and I go over them in this order for a reason. First, change what carbohydrates you're eating. Second, change when you're eating. And third, change how much carbohydrate you're eating. Now, some people may need to just do 1 or 2 of these things, and some people may need to do all 3 in order to get their insulin resistance under control. But before we get started, disclaimer that this is not medical advice. We're not entering into a doctor-patient relationship. And if you're considering implementing one of these interventions for yourself, please speak with your medical provider to see if it might be right for you. Okay, so the first step, relatively simple, low risk, is changing what carbohydrates you're eating. So this is what I would recommend pretty much everyone start with, and it's probably not a new idea to most of you. But the concept is that instead of eating refined carbohydrates that are going to cause a really rapid glucose spike and then crash, you're going to eat complex whole food carbohydrates that are still full of fiber and nutrients and are going to give you a sustained release of energy over time. And it's going to be more of a smooth peak of that blood glucose and energy rather than that rapid spike and crash. Not only is it full of fiber, micronutrients, but it's going to keep you full and satiated for longer. So what does this look like? This looks like switching from refined sugars and carbohydrates, things like bread, pasta, cereal, cookies, candies, ice cream, all of those things, to whole food carbs. So fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, things like that. An additional tip is that if you pair these carbohydrates with fiber, fat, and protein, that's going to help to dampen that sugar spike even more. Okay, so pretty simple, right? The next step might be a little bit more of a new idea to you. So let's say that the above step, it's helped with how you're feeling, a little bit with your lab values, but you're still having things that are outside the normal values, you're still having some symptoms. Then it might be time to move on to the next step, which is to change when you're eating your carbohydrates and food in general. The idea behind this is that when you're constantly eating and there's a constant influx of carbohydrates and sugar, then your insulin is always high. And over time, this is going to be what leads to insulin resistance and ultimately diabetes. So when you give your body a break from eating for long enough for your insulin levels to come back down, that's how you combat insulin resistance and reverse it. So I would start with recommending that everyone cut out the snacks, cut down to 3 square meals a day with a 12-hour overnight fast, okay? Most people are fasting only 8 hours overnight, and this is not enough of our break for our bodies to recover from all of the carbohydrates that we're eating during the day. Now, this might sound simple, but if you're used to eating every 2 to 3 hours while you're awake and last thing before you go to bed and the first thing when you wake up in the morning, it's going to be a challenge. So be patient with yourself. If you can't get through till your next meal, it's okay. Just pick up and try again for the next fasting window. And it will get easier over time as your body adjusts and becomes more metabolically flexible. So once you're into that pattern of 12-hour overnight fast, 3 square meals a day, then start to extend your overnight fast with a goal of 14 to 16 hours. And if you feel great with that, you can extend it even further. Maybe skip breakfast some days of the week. Now, there are some situations in which I would recommend being cautious with intense fasting regimens. And I'm thinking specifically of women of childbearing age. So if you're pregnant, if you're nursing, if you're trying to conceive, this is not the time to be implementing an intense fasting schedule. Additionally, if you're a woman who likes to do a lot of intense exercise, that's another stressor on the body. And so I wouldn't go too intense with the fasting as well. And as we'll talk about in another video, exercise is another great tool to help reverse insulin resistance in and of itself. So during these times, if you're in one of these categories and you just want to go to the 3 square meals a day with a 12-hour overnight fast, that's a great strategy. You're going to have benefits from that. Now, people might ask, is it better to have an earlier or later fasting window? So the ideal situation is that you're going to be eating when the sun is out and fasting when it's down. So naturally, this usually lends itself to an earlier fasting window. And the studies do back this up, that there are more metabolic health benefits with an earlier fasting window. That being said, of course, some people's schedules aren't going to allow for this, or people just want to eat dinner with their family, and that's okay too. You're still going to have a lot of metabolic health benefits to having a fasting window, even if it's a little bit later. So do what works for you. you. If an earlier fasting window works for you, amazing. If a later one works, then that's okay too. Okay, so let's say you've done these 2 things and you're noticing benefits, but you're still just not to the point where you want to be. The next step would be to reduce the amount of carbohydrates that you're actually consuming. Now, I know people don't want to do this, and that's why I started with the other 2 things. The hope would be that if you switch to whole food carbohydrates, you're doing your intermittent fasting, that you may not need to move on to the next step of reducing your actual carbohydrate intake, but some people will need to. Now, for reference, the standard American diet consists of about 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrates per day. In contrast, on the other end of the spectrum, a dairy-free carnivore diet would be 0 grams, and a ketogenic diet would probably be about 20 to 30 grams. But you don't have to go all the way to a ketogenic diet necessarily. Some people may want or need to, but anything at like 150 grams of carbs or below is going to be carb restricted. So you can start much more gradually, maybe try and do about 50 grams of carbohydrates per meal and see how you feel with that. If you're feeling good or you want to keep going, you can reduce further. If you're at those more gradual levels of carbohydrate restriction, you don't generally need medical supervision, and that it is generally safe for most people to consume around 150 grams of carbs per day. But if you're getting down to the lower levels of carb restriction of like 50 grams or less, then you may be getting into ketogenic diet territory, and it would be a good idea to have some medical provider on board to be monitoring you and to be making sure that you're not having any adverse effects. Now, like I mentioned, there are a lot of other factors like sleep, stress, and exercise that can also impact your insulin levels and help to reverse insulin resistance. But ultimately, your diet is going to be the single most important factor, which is why I wanted to start with that. But we'll definitely get to the others in another video. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more metabolic and lifestyle psychiatry content. Thanks.